Okay, so having built up our frames to the point they are now, the next job is to put together our tail assembly, and then following that we'll put together the torque tube and the front gearbox onto the boom, and then the whole thing will be bolted into our frames. So first part of this is putting together the tail gearbox and assembling the tail rotor hub onto our output shaft here, and getting our pitch slider and bell crank all installed as well. And the vertical tail fin is also a part of that whole process as well, although we'll come on to this a little bit later. Okay, so first job is to go over this gearbox, which is pre-assembled, take all the screws out, Loctite them and put them back in again, which I've already done. It was actually pretty good. Most of the screws, apart from one on this, were Loctited, but I took them all out and redid them anyway. For the tail hub, neither of the screws in this were Loctited, and the bearings in here also needed a bit more grease on them. There was very little grease on them, so I had to take the screws out of this, Loctite them and re-grease the bearings, which I've already done, but it was all assembled correctly. So first job then is to assemble our pitch slider. This piece here needs the ball screwing into it on the underside on there, and then that can be installed onto here and connected up to our tail rotor and our bell crank. So it's a bit of a fiddly job and I can't really show it to you a step at a time, so I'll put it together and you can see what it looks like. Okay, I started assembling this, and there's a couple of things I just want to mention. One is, don't forget to Loctite these little screws here and here on this. On mine, neither of those were Loctited. Loctite this ball onto the pitch arm, the pitch slider there as well. When you come to the bell crank, there is a little washer that goes both underneath the screw head here and down here as well, to space this away from our arm on the gearbox. So don't forget to put those on and in place, and then Loctite this on. When you screw this down, you kind of screw it down with, I'll try and show you this, you put the hole from this over the ball like so, and then line up the screw hole, and then with it sort of all held in place, you then screw it on. But you have to line everything up and then screw it on like that, otherwise you'll find that you screw this arm down and then you can't get the ball into the cup on this plastic piece. So you need to line it up first and then screw it all together. Bit fiddly, but that's the way you have to do it. Okay, so I've got that mounted on there now. You can see the ball on the end of the arm here, which I've installed, this ball here. The ball on the pitch slider itself, which you can see is sort of in that cup, and then when you've mounted it up, you should end up with it looking like that. Now this is effectively the top of the gearbox, and then the pitch slider is underneath down there and works your pitch slider like so. Okay, right, I'll now install the tail rotor onto there with these bushes which go in these little arms here, and these screws which need Loctite on them, which go into the grip arms, the tail grip arms here. Okay, and then we have the tail rotor installed. With regard to these arms, the way these go is that the actual control arm itself leads the blade, so the blades will spin this way, which is anti-clockwise, and the arm should be leading the blade. And then there's a grub screw holding this on the tail output shaft. Again, Loctite on there, Loctite on the bolts that go into the grips themselves, and that's pretty much it. That's your tail rotor built, and the tail pitch slider works the tail rotor, as you can see. Okay, so for the next step we're going to actually mount our tail gearbox onto our boom, and what I've got here is the boom itself. You can see, yeah, whole boom. It's got this cut out in one end. This is the end that goes into the frames, and then at the other end you've got this hole, and this is the end that goes onto or goes into our tail gearbox. So if I just switch this around so you can see how this goes, effectively this goes in there. Now what's important to know is that underneath these screws here's a hole, and basically you get the two holes to line up like that, and then this plastic piece that we just took off has a locator pin in it, and that locator pin goes through the hole in the boom like that, which stops our boom from coming out of the gearbox. And then these two screws go in and bolt our tail fin, which goes on there as well. The tail fin goes on there, and then the bolts go through that into the tail boom and basically clamp the whole thing in place. Now this is where we come to the first tip and first problem with the kit, which is this vertical tail fin. This vertical tail fin is very thin and it bends. You can see I'm bending this really easily, and what's going to happen is when we fly the model, this is going to vibrate, and it's going to vibrate really badly, and it's going to cause problems with the tail rotor wagging and being very unsettled and being a real problem. So first tip is take this, throw it in the bin, get a Trex 600 vertical tail fin, which is much stiffer than this, and fit that to your model instead. Okay, so I'm not actually going to use this part because I know it's going to cause me problems, and I'm going to bolt a Trex 600 fin on the rear of my machine. Okay, so I've just taken the fin off the back of my Trex 600N, and I can show you here the difference in size between them. And this one, as you can see, bends pretty easy. This one doesn't bend at all. That's what I'm going to fit to my machine. Okay, and if you've been following along, this is what you end up with. Tail fin secured like so, and that's the other side with the screws through here, and the locator pin is nicely seated in the boom, so the boom won't come out and is nice and secure. So that's the back end of the machine put together. We've now got to put together the torque tube to go in our boom, and then bolt the front gearbox and horizontal fin onto this assembly, and then that can all be installed into the machine. So the next job is the torque tube, or the shaft drive I should say, because the boom is actually the torque tube and the metal shaft that goes down the middle is the shaft. Not many people know that, but it's actually the boom that is the torque tube. Okay, so here we have our shaft, which goes in the torque tube, which is the boom, and in the middle, which is not in the middle, it's offset, and you need to check the instructions on this, but at 28.1 centimeters from one end of the shaft and 29.6 centimeters from the other end of the shaft, you place this rubber bushing, which has the bearing in the center of it. There's a little bearing that goes in the center of it, and you epoxy that in place on your boom, and then slide the whole assembly down the boom until it locates in the tail gearbox at the rear. Okay, so that's the shaft inserted into the boom. Now one thing to be careful of is that the length of shaft that is 28.1 centimeters to the bearing that's in the middle, that needs to be towards the front of your boom, and the 29.6 centimeter length goes to the rear and locates into the gearbox at the back there, and if I turn the torque tube you can see it's turning the tail, so that's located. I've also now added these two supports for the tail push rod onto the boom, and we're now ready to install the front gearbox onto the boom and then put the horizontal tail fin and boom supports on, ready for mounting into the frames themselves. Okay, here we have our front tail gearbox. There's no need to take this apart. The only thing you need to be aware of is that when you look down inside here, in one side, and it's this side here, you'll see that there's a little bit, I don't know whether you can see it on camera, but there's a little bit that sticks out, which is a locator pin for the boom. And if you look at the boom, you'll see that there is a slot in it. There's the slot, and that is what the locator pin goes into. It goes into that slot. So the locator pin is this side, so effectively this bit goes on like that, and then when you push it in you can normally feel that it hits the locator pin, and then the boom has hit that locator pin and the boom can't twist anymore. And if you pull it out, we get the point where it can twist, as you can see, and then can't twist when it's located on that. And then when you look the other side here, you'll see that there is a hole here, so this boom needs to go down far enough into the gearbox here that when we put the bolt through, it goes through that hole, through the hole in the outer casing here, and then through that hole there. Now the reason this has only gone in a little way is because it hasn't located into the front gearbox properly yet, so we need to get that all the way in, and then we can put the screw through to locate in that hole. Okay, so to secure here you need this little socket button-headed screw effectively. Now this is not a self-tapper, this is an engineering screw designed to go into metal. It's not a self-tapping button-headed screw. There's only one of these in the kit, and it goes in there. So we install that into there, bit of Loctite on it as well, just to try and make it grip, and that should hold our boom in place. Okay, and that's the screw installed. Having put this in, it's actually being held in by the plastic rather than the metal that screw is going into, so you may be better off not putting any Loctite on that and just putting that in there dry, because it's actually being held by the plastic more than it is the metal of the boom the other side, so miss the Loctite off of there. Okay, next job is our horizontal fin clamp, which I've got here. These small screws, they're the ones that go in the side, or in this bit, and bolt the boom supports on, and they use these washers as well. The long screws are the ones that go in through the top, and they don't have a washer on them and just bolt through into the clamp itself. So I'll just put that on and you can see what that looks like. Okay, so there we have the horizontal fin mounted. You can see how that's gone on there, and now we can mount the boom supports to that, and then we're ready to install the whole of this into the back of our frames. Okay, so there you can see the boom supports installed, and now the whole thing, if I bring the whole thing into view, that can now be installed into the back of our frames. Okay, so here we have our completed tail assembly inserted into our frames. I'll just twist this around a little bit like that. You can see how that's gone in. There's a couple of locator pins here and the same on the other side that locate it in place. I also had to take this screw out here either side and just swivel the battery tray, sorry, not the battery tray, the tail servo tray down in order to allow this to pass and go into the frames, and then once it's in you can then swivel the tail servo back up and put those screws back in, and that's in place. And now we can bolt through in the 6 locations, 2 there, 2 there and 2 at the front, to hold that all in place. And we can also put the bolts in the back here as well to clamp that boom in place, and I've already put the retaining screw for the boom in as well. Also, I've bolted the boom supports on. It's a 10mm screw with a washer which bolts those onto the bottom at the back there. Okay, so you should find that there's a packet somewhere which has got this hardware in it. These quite long self-tapping button-headed screws, and then 4 engineering screws with nylock nuts. And those are what we use to bolt the front gearbox into our frames. So I'll go ahead and put that together. Okay, so here we can see all the screws in place. Down the bottom here, the 4 in place, and then the 2, 4, 6, and the same on either side, holding that in place. So that's now secure, and there's no way that the boom can come out of there. When you're doing up these screws, bear in mind they are into plastic, so don't go grilling them up and using loads of strength to put them in. As soon as they start to nip tight, that's all they need. You don't need to do them up really tight.